Howdy, folks. Video today is about learning to identify and punctuate appositive phrases. As part of our kind of a continuation of our last lesson, an appositive phrase is a type of non-essential phrase, and it gets its own video because it's pretty nuanced, and so there's just a little more information that we need to talk about. They're pretty common in our writing, as you'll see. So figuring out how to identify and punctuate these is important. So as always, make sure that you're taking notes. All right, so an appositive phrase is a type of non-essential phrase, and it's basically a noun or a noun phrase, a group of words that renames another noun that we've already introduced into our sentence. So here's an example. The Yellowstone River, my favorite river, is great to fish in the fall. Now notice how this is acting like a non-essential phrase, right? It's interrupting the flow of my sentence. I could take it out and the meaning of the sentence doesn't change. This is extra information. I want you to know that the Yellowstone River is my favorite river. So I could read this either way. So I could say the Yellowstone River is great to fish in the fall, or I could also say my favorite river is great to fish in the fall. Both sentences work, but since I'm giving you both of them, the second definition of the term is going to be separated with commas as a non-essential appositive phrase. Here's another example. So my brother often likens himself to Thor, the god of thunder. If you don't know who Thor is in Norse mythology, you might need that little extra information. It's not essential for the meaning of my sentence, right? My brother can still liken himself to Thor. He's a big, strong guy, bearded. But if I want to add that extra information and kind of rename Thor here, I could do that using this appositive phrase. I could also say my brother often likens himself to the god of thunder. Sentence still works, right? I'm just using this noun phrase to redefine Thor here. So here's where it gets tricky, though, is that context in this sense matters. So take a look at this sentence. My cousin Anna works in the laboratory. Now I have my cousin Anna. I could say Anna works in the laboratory. I could say my cousin works in the laboratory. So depending on the context of who Anna is and who your cousins are, the use of commas might change. So if I write it this way, this implies that I have more than one cousin, so the name is essential to the meaning, right? I've got 78 cousins. I don't know if that's true or not. I have a lot of cousins. So I need you to know that this is my cousin Anna, not my cousin Amber, who works in the laboratory. If I wrote it this way, my cousin Anna works in the laboratory. This would imply that I only have one cousin, so this name becomes non-essential. This is extra information. And so that's kind of how you can tell some context in writing. If I write it this way, my cousin Anna, that means I have lots of cousins. If I write it this way, my cousin Anna, that means I only have one cousin. Okay, the last tricky thing about appositive phrases is when we're going from a broad term to a specific term. We're not going to use commas because when I'm going from broad to specific, remember that means I'm kind of like narrowing things down. So if I give that specific reference after my broad reference, it's kind of essential information that I need to know to define what specific term I'm talking about in this broader context. So don't separate these essential elements. The American writer Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson, was a controversial figure, right? I could say the American writer was a controversial figure, and I could say Emerson was a controversial figure, but since there's a lot of American writers and there's only one Emerson, since I'm going from broad to specific, I'm not going to use commas here. If I flipped them, then I would use commas, right? Because then I'm going from my specific thing to a broader context. So that becomes extra information. You already know exactly who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Emerson. I'm not just talking about any American writer. But if I want to make sure that you know that he's an American writer, I might add in this appositive phrase. The other time that we're going to leave commas out is when we're using titles. So if I'm talking about like Principal Earn or President of the US Joe Biden or anybody who has like a title in front of their name, we're not going to use commas on this one either, right? President of the US Joe Biden, you're just going to leave it off on titles debated last night. Okay, let's practice some of this. So as always, we've got Mr. John Cena here. I want you to take a look at these three sentences and try to identify the appositive phrases and get commas in there correctly. Go ahead and press pause and give it a shot. Did you do it? Great. Let's check your answers. All right. So Ori, the bestest boy, runs circles around the yard. Ori is my dog. My friend Sam is going to Taco Bell today. I left this off because I'm going to imply that I have more than one friend. Maybe you do only have like one best friend. So I might say my best friend, Sam, is going to Taco Bell today. Because if you know me and Sam, we get along really well. So if I had maybe a more specific definition of who this friend is, I might add commas in. Or maybe if you're like, man, I'm a person who only has one friend, put those commas in there, right? Changes the context, or the context changes the sentence. And this one was tough because I put the appositive phrase at the beginning of the sentence. A gleaming tower of steel, his apartment building is one of the most recognizable in the city. That one was tricky, right? Because normally I might say his apartment building, a gleaming tower of steel, is one of the most recognizable in the city. Um, but by putting it at the beginning, I tried to throw you off a little bit because it doesn't quite work. A gleaming steel tower is one of the most recognizable in the city. I don't know if we would say that, but this would still count as an appositive phrase that's acting as an introduction to the sentence. It's just a slightly more creative way to kind of build a different type of sentence structure. It adds some interest to what we're talking about. So good luck identifying and talking about, or identifying and writing, finding, punctuating positive phrases, and then try to work these into your own writing. It's a great way to develop and expand your sentences. All right, good luck, folks.